Bayonetta 3 has been a long time coming. It was originally announced back in 2017, and with the last entry in the series being about 8 years ago, fans were eager to get their hands on the conclusion to this trilogy. Bayonetta 3 feels like the biggest leap in changes for the series with a revamped battle system, a story with actual stakes, and perhaps the most impressive presentation the series has had thus far. Bayonetta 3 is easily everything I could have hoped for with the sequel, despite it being occasionally held back by the hardware it's on. Bayonetta 3 continues a lot of the same themes from the series' prior entries. It's incredibly self-aware, campy, and cheesy, so much so that newcomers to the series who aren't aware that a lot of this is written on purpose may lose out on some of the charm that the series is known for. With that said, Bayonetta 3 feels like a self-contained story, one that newcomers should feel completely fine using as a jumping off point for the series. Bayonetta 3 starts off in a completely different tone. The villains here feel much more viable with actual stakes involved. Bayonetta 1 and 2 both had pretty solid villains, but not once did I ever feel like there were any actual stakes. The character's plot armor was easily apparent, and so I didn't really play these games to see the conclusion of these stories, but rather for the entertainment of the ride. Bayonetta 3 feels different in that regard, that even when the story doesn't feel like a well-written cinematic masterpiece, it still feels a notch above from what I played in the series so far. Bayonetta 3 opens up on a multiversal threat called the Singularity, causing the end of the world not just for our Bayonetta, but every Bayonetta of the multiverse. Naturally, this brings along multiversal allies, including various other versions of Bayonetta to team up and stop the oncoming universal threat. If that synopsis is a bit vague, it's because a lot of the fun in the writing comes from these interactions, and they should foremost be experienced without spoilers. Rest assured that Bayonetta 3's writing is the most on-brand the series has ever been since its introduction, and it's a lot of fun. Not to downplay the previous entry Bayonetta 2, but a lot of the gameplay from that entry fell in line with Bayonetta 1. An update, but an incremental one. That's just to say that Bayonetta 3 feels like a completely new game, one that leaps and bounds ahead of either of the previous entries. Most of those changes come from the battle system. Bayonetta can still perform her usual combat moves like a basic kick, punch, and projectile weapon, making her feel familiar to any veteran players. However, in addition to being able to combo these attacks, she's able to lash out her climaxes and torture attacks. Mixing and matching these attacks in conjunction with well-timed dodges is the name of the game, but the shiny new ability comes in the form of summons. In the middle of a fight, Bayonetta will fill up a gauge that, with every attack, allows her to summon demons. While holding down the shoulder buttons, you're able to control these demons as giant kaiju allies. It's quite the spectacle in terms of both visuals and gameplay that add a fun layer of strategy to fights. Admittedly, these moments can get a bit chaotic, but in an entertainment way that never cease to put a smile on my face. Different demons also offer different layers of mechanics that only further increase the strategic depth. Add on to this the usual accessories and healing items, and Bayonetta feels the most fun it's ever felt in regards to gameplay. Rest assured too that if you don't invest in learning these new mechanics, you'll be punished accordingly if you just button smash on the easiest difficulty. In this new combat system, you're able to have a total of 2 weapons at a time that feature their own sets of combos and further flesh out the combos that you can perform. You can switch out the weapons to better suit different weapons against specific enemy types. You're given so many options for movement, combat, and battle management that only reiterates that Bayonetta feels the most evolved it's ever been. These battles are the meat and potatoes of this entry, but not the sole gameplay type. Aside from Bayonetta, you're able to take on the role of Viola, a sword-wielding character from a different world that offers a more unique playstyle of combat. Where Bayonetta is confident and cool, Viola is goofy and plays more like Dante from DMC. There are even a few side-scroller sections that feel similar to Katana Zero or My Friend Pedro, a stealth-like approach to 2D side-scrollers. While these weren't my favorite sections of the gameplay, they offered a nice change of pace between traditional levels. Heck, there are even these spectacle kaiju fights that feel like PlatinumGames' approach to Godzilla Destroy All Monsters. These aren't the most exciting gameplay moments, but visually truly showcase the graphical upgrade since Bayonetta 2. Overall, Bayonetta 3 completely revamps almost every aspect of the traditional gameplay that the series has been known for, and for the better. Considering the Wii U was in line with the PS3 and the 360, Bayonetta 2 feels like a minor jump for the series. But years later, Bayonetta 3, gameplay alone, feels like a true generational leap for the series on Nintendo Switch. It's easily one of the best games to come out of PlatinumGames, and maybe tied with Nier Automata for my favorite game from the developer. Bayonetta 3 is a spectacle showcase for the series. Immediately I was drawn to the improved facial animations and character models since Bayonetta 2, and for all intents and purposes, this is a generational leap for the series considering that the Wii U, PS3, and 360 weren't too far apart in performance. That's not to say that this game is perfect in presentation though. Environmental textures can be a bit low, and despite characters and foreground elements being sharp, the rest of the image sort of fades in the background. I will commend PlatinumGames on its ability to showcase the most important elements first, while trying to hide the more low-resolution objects in the background. When paired with the series' fast-action gameplay, it makes the uglier elements easier to look at, or at least dismiss. With that said, a lot of the general gameplay does tax the Nintendo Switch, and it's apparent that the console is being pushed to its limits. Bayonetta 3 targets a 720p dynamic resolution with the 60fps target in dock mode, but rarely does it ever hit that target. Usually the frame rate ranges from 45 to 53 frames per second, usually hovering on an average around 50 frames per second. That frame rate gets a little better in handheld mode, although at the cost of running at around 480p resolution. The image is soft, but prioritizing frame rate I think was the correct choice. Sadly, it just doesn't manage to hit those targets due to the Nintendo Switch's constrained memory bandwidth. Again, the fast-paced nature of the gameplay does make it a bit easier to dismiss these drawbacks, but not entirely. Unfortunately, it's just a matter of the lower spec hardware here finally being pushed to its limits. There's a lot of chaos and mess regarding the voice work with this title, and I think enough has been said online regarding the subject already. What I do want to say is that the cast here, including Bayonetta's new actress, sounds marvelous and captures the campy nature of the series perfectly. Music continues to be filled with catchy oldie bops being mixed with the series' battle themes. This entry also makes pretty good use of the Switch's HD rumble. I was a big fan of seeing Bayonetta's combos and climax attacks sync up to the HD rumble, making some of these visual spectacles all the more impactful. Bayonetta 3 is easily the best entry in the series and arguably one of the best games to come from developer PlatinumGames. Visually, the game looks the best it's ever been despite the hardware technical hiccups. The gameplay feels evolved in ways I only dreamed the first sequel was going to be. Music and sound design continue to be as good as prior entries, even with the change in the cast. While I wouldn't say Bayonetta is a game to be played for its story, the writing and the stakes of this story is a noticeable step above from what we've seen before. All in all, Bayonetta 3 is the sequel I think fans have been eagerly anticipated since it was originally announced back in 2017, and even with the technical hiccups, it's easily one of the most fun action games to grace the Nintendo hybrid console.